Round one of the fantasy playoffs is in the books, and if you have booked your ticket to the semifinals, we would like to say congratulations. Thank you for rolling with us this year on the Regression to the Mean podcast. Your success is our success. If you are new to our channel, first off, welcome. We've got a ton of new folks that are watching our content for the first time. We love bringing in new folks here to this channel. And second, if you haven't yet, go ahead, hit the subscribe button. You don't want to miss out on all of the content that we have coming to you on a weekly basis. And we're going to have so much content rolling out to you in the offseason. We are in the process of building out 2024 planning, and we have so much exciting stuff planned for you, our Mean Team members. I am your host, Sean Moran, and I am joined by my co-host, my good friend, and this week, my fantasy football arch nemesis, Aidan Haller. Aidan, how you doing today, dude?
Sean, thanks for having me again. Always good to talk waivers with you. I'm about 24 hours removed since putting the tombstone on the 2023 Chicago Bears. So I've had time to move on, and my sights are set on our two semifinal matches this week. Myself and Sean are squaring up in our pretty much like two main leagues of mine. And yeah, we've got a double date in the semifinals. So I'm fired up, man. It's funny that it ended up this way, huh?
Yeah, there's a potential possibility where we have our double date here in our two, probably two of the three biggest leagues I play in, which is hilarious. I played Keegan this week. Gave him a 190-point curb stomping, so that was a good
Just
time.
brutal.
Last year I was eliminated in the fantasy playoffs from Keegan and Aidan in the same exact week in the two leagues that we were talking about. I've got an opportunity to avenge what happened last year, so I'm juiced. And then we have our Dynasty League too that we play in. If you win in the semis, we'll see each other in the championship in Dynasty, which would be fun. That'd be a great time. Week 15 is in the books. It's a crazy week. I mean, and there were so many injuries that happened in week 15, Aidan. You got Will Levis hurting his ankle, Trevor Lawrence with a concussion, Zach Moss hurts his arm, Keaton Mitchell tears his ACL, Michael Pittman has a concussion, Jaden Reed hurts his toe, Jamar Chase separates his shoulder, Marquise Brown injures his heel. And in week 14, we had Josh Jacobs out. We had Keenan Allen out. We had Nico Collins out. We had CJ Stroud out. Tyreek Hill didn't play. Christian Watson continues to be banged up. Brian Robinson isn't playing. That's so many key players now that aren't playing.
It's an absolute disaster, a minefield of injuries. So
it's insane what's happening right now. And we always say this every year. It's insane. The NFL in December is no holds bars. Everyone's hurt. Everyone's dealing with something. It's so hard to maintain healthy, and it's kind of a war of attrition. Are your main guys going to be healthy? And then are you strategically going to be able to work the waiver wire where you're picking up kind of random nobodies to stream that have really good weeks? Looking at you, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Thank you for that 20-point outburst, CEH. But on today's episode, we have our Week 16 waiver wire targets. The waivers are always so important to work at this time of the year. It's less competitive. There are really only 4 or 5 guys vying for specific people. It's very need specific, right? So on today's episode, we're going to walk through running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, quarterbacks, and we might throw out a couple defenses this week, right? We are going to potentially put out a streamers episode later in the week after we go through our running back and wide receiver rankings. So stay tuned for that. That's why you need to subscribe, turn on the notifications so you get these episodes when they come out. Each episode is time-stamped. So if you just have questions at tight end, just go to the timestamps where it says tight end. You could jump around. Feel free to go to the spots that you think are going to be the most specific for you in your fantasy lineup. If you have any specific start-sit questions, if you have who should I drop, who should I pick up questions, feel free to drop them in the comments below. We don't know the context of your league's waiver wire, but we want to help. So feel free to drop those questions below. Aidan, you ready to kick things off here?
Let's do this thing, man.
You want to start with running backs?
Let's do it. Running backs it is. Cool. I think there's an obvious place to start here. We covered him last week, and hopefully you cashed in on Ty Chandler. What a week by Ty Chandler. This is a guy that we've been kind of like begging to get more touches all year, and absolutely exploded this year. Dude had 23 carries for 130 yards, just under 6 yards a carry. Had a touchdown on the ground. Caught three of his four targets for 25 yards. Dude was running back 4 on the week. Just for context, Madison never broke top 10. We can say what we want about Madison. It was a pretty cushy matchup for Ty Chandler too. Like this was like the perfect matchup to do something like this week. But dude absolutely went crazy. Even if Madison returns, I've got to assume he's going to retain at least 50% of these touches. A bit of a tricky matchup this week, though. They are playing Detroit, who give up the least amount of fantasy points to running backs. So again, proceed with caution there in terms of past history there. He's also owned in just over 50% of leagues. So like the odds of him still being there are pretty low, but this is my number one running back priority personally on the waiver wire. Second guy I've got, Shaun already name dropped him a little bit, is Clyde. Can't believe we're here with Clyde going into week 16 as a priority pickup. The dude played awesome this week, had 13 carries, just under 40 yards, caught 4 passes for 64 yards, had that really long catch, which made up a lot of that. Found pay dirt too on that short touchdown. Running back 8 on the week. My favorite part here is he played 62% of the snaps. It came out that Pacheco ended up getting surgery, which I think like they really downplayed at first. Seemed like he was kind of just like day to day, gonna miss a week, getting surgery. Like things escalated pretty quick. If he's out again, like Clyde's a must play. They're playing the Raiders this week, who gave up the ninth most amount of points to running backs. So really favorable matchup. Again, even if Pacheco plays, I can't imagine he takes over like the lead bell cow role again. Clyde is kind of here in the fantasy playoffs, which if you would have told me week 1, I would have called you crazy. Another backup here to keep an eye on is Zamir White. This one I'm not quite as bullish on, just given that I would expect Josh Jacobs to be back this week, but it is still worth noting, like he played really well this week. 17 carries, just under 70 yards and a touchdown, caught a couple passes too. He was RB11 on the week. Really strong play. If Josh Jacobs is out, you can't start him. Just like kind of plain and simple. The only reason he really makes sense is if he's out. The last one that's really just a dart throw, this one is even more injury dependent that Shaun get a kick out of, is Trey Sermon. Who
49er legend, Trey Sermon.
Yeah. So this one, like, we need 2 people to not play for Trey Sermon really to have like any value. Zach Moss went down. It's kind of day to day right now. No telling if he's going to play this week, and there's kind of no timeline yet on JT either. It feels like he's really close and could return as soon as this week. If even one of those guys are playing, Trey Sermon's not going to do you anything. But it's worth noting, Trey Sermon had 17 carries for 88 yards. That's just over 5 yards a clip. Pretty efficient. They are going up against the Falcons, too, who give up the second least amount of fantasy points per game. So not an easy matchup. So this one's really injury dependent. If those 2 guys can't go, someone's got to carry the football for them. This offense keeps scoring. They just hung 30 against the Steelers, who, are a pretty good unit, or at least, mid-pack. And, they put up a pretty easy 30 piece on them. So, out of those 4, Shaun, kind of who do you like, and is there anyone I missed?
I think Chandler's the obvious. I think Alexander Madison's going to miss at least another week with a high ankle sprain. One of my favorite follows on all of Twitter is this guy named Crack Rock. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Crack Rock on Twitter. Unreal follow. He has Patrick Mahomes as his Avy, and he just talks about how he spends all of his time with NFL owners and like Donald Trump on golf courses. And he said that the Vikings owners love Ty Chandler. So take that with a grain of salt here. But I'm a fan of Ty Chandler. I've been a bit of a hater in the sense like, hey, if Ty Chandler's so good, why hasn't he carved out a bigger role? I don't know why he didn't, because he looked pretty good. That was a cake matchup, though. That front isn't very good, so you can definitely run on him. But I think you could confidently start Ty Chandler as an RB2 or a flex. I think if Josh Jacobs were to continue missing time, Zamir White's my second favorite option. Pacheco's supposed to be good to go this week.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing.
Clyde looked really good as a receiver. I don't know. I'd pick up Clyde. I'd hold Clyde. I wouldn't drop him by any means.
Okay.
But I am very intrigued with Zamir White because I think he is someone you can easily start if Josh Jacobs were to miss another week.
Without a doubt.
And we don't know much about that thigh injury with Jacobs. He did play on a short week, and that's where he sat. So we'll see. If you have Zamir White, don't drop him. If you are in the second round, go pick him up because you could easily start him as an RB2 flex option if Josh Jacobs misses time again. So, yeah, I like what you have here at running back. Moving on to wide receiver here. Not as great of options, in my opinion, as running back. I do think there are some interesting ones. So I'm going to start first and foremost with a wide receiver on the Green Bay Packers, Dontayvion Wicks. This is kind of a war of attrition right now for the Packers offense. Like Jaden Reed potentially has turf toe. We'll see. Don't know the status of his toe, but keep an eye on that. Christian Watson probably is back next week with his hamstring, but that's always a TBD. It may take him another 2 weeks for him to look good, and he'll probably have a 50-point explosion in week 18 when none of it matters. But things are kind of lining up pretty well for Wicks, who has shown tremendous flashes as a rookie. We reference a stat called yards per route run all the time. It's essentially an efficiency stat for wide receivers. And there's like a 2 yards per route run threshold we'd love to see rookies hit. And Dontayvion Wicks actually leads the entire Packers receiving core right now in yards per route run as a 6th-round rookie. He's shown incredible flashes as a rookie this season. And this guy kind of reminds me of Nico Collins to an extent, where big speed guy and he's really tall. He's like 6'4", total like typical X wide receiver. He's someone I'm going to be paying close attention to next year in fantasy drafts. But he's got a matchup against the Panthers in week 16, who've been stingy to wideouts because they just give up a ton of points to running backs. But then he's got the Vikings in week 17, and the Vikings have been super friendly to wideouts this year. So I like Wicks. I think he's really interesting. I don't know if I'd trust him, but I'd rather play a Ty Chandler or a Zamir White. Next receiver that I have here is Parker Washington, another 6th-round rookie wide receiver here for the Jaguars. So Christian Kirk is out. Zay Jones is week to week with a hamstring injury. So this offense and this passing game is really shaping up to be Calvin Ridley, Evan Ingram, and Parker Washington, and they cannot run the ball right now. Since they lost their tackle, Cam Robinson, they can't run the ball at all. Their run game stinks. So this is just going to be a heavy dose of Calvin Ridley, Evan Ingram, and Parker Washington to close out the fantasy playoffs for the Jaguars. Washington has seen 15 targets over the past 3 weeks, so close to 5 a game. He's caught 2 touchdowns over this stretch, including a highlight reel grab in his really first big game as a rookie. He has a matchup this week against the Bucs, which is probably the most friendly matchup to wide receivers right now. Basically, they just stop the run and dare you to pass. Wicks just had 96 receiving yards this week against the Tampa Bay secondary. I expect Washington to be heavily involved. This actually is setting up for a huge Calvin Ridley smash week when all of his teams have been eliminated, ironically. But this is a great spot for this pass game. And then you have the Panthers on week 17, and the Panthers have been stingy. So this is a good streamer this week against Tampa Bay, but Trevor Lawrence has a concussion. So,
yeah,
yeah,
there's a lot going on there. There's a lot to unpack, but there's a lot to like at the same time. Like the targets, the lack of other people. Like, there's a lot to like there. It's I like him.
Washington has the matchup over Wicks, but Wicks has, I think, been better, more consistent, and Jordan Love clearly has a bit of a rapport with him. But TBD, Wicks is going to be a hard start, in my opinion, if both Watson and Reed are active. The next wide receiver I've got here is Jameson Williams. We're here at the point where J-Mo is coming off a career high in targets and receptions. That would be 7 targets and 4 receptions. So something.
Hold your breath. Hold your breath.
Something Dontayvion Wicks has cleared multiple times this year, and Jameson Williams, year 2 first-round pick. Dan Campbell has made it very clear that they're going to look to get Williams more involved. And Dan Campbell is a pretty reliable coach speak kind of guy at the podium. So I think Williams is someone who, when he is given a full complement of targets, snaps, and opportunities, is going to absolutely explode. Is that going to happen this week against Minnesota? It could. Minnesota's definitely beatable by wide receivers. Is it probably just going to happen in 2024? Yeah, probably. Right. Maybe he has a big playoff game and that's his breakout game. We're all kind of waiting for Jameson. If you have the stones to start him in week 16, I want to shake your hand. I want to shake your hand.
I want to shake
but
your hand.
He's a kind of fun start. He's kind of a fun start. It's just kind of a good matchup. Usage is trending up, but yeah. I still think Wicks is the safest play in my opinion. And then the last guy I have at wide receiver is Demarcus Robinson, who is now a Los Angeles Ram. If you haven't been paying attention, he's no longer dropping passes for Lamar or Patrick Mahomes. He's now actually catching the ball for Matt Stafford. He is kind of living as their deep threat vertical stretcher right now because Tutu Atwell's been injured. And because Matthew Stafford is off a heater, Robinson has been thriving. He's had the wide receiver 22 usage over the past 3 weeks with the wide receiver 25 production. That's fantastic usage over a 3-week stretch. I know if we stretch it to 6-7 weeks, it's not going to be as good, but that's really strong usage. He's got 2 great matchups against the Saints on Thursday Night Football and the Giants in week 17. So all interesting. If you had to pick a wide receiver, Aidan, who you going with?
Out of the 3 you mentioned, I'm probably going with Wicks.
Yeah, probably.
I think it's another one that we kind of mentioned, like everything else is kind of just falling around him. Like he's got a pretty good rapport with Jordan Love. And he's been producing, super reliable, both, inside, outside of the numbers. I feel like he's, a pretty dynamic wide receiver. They've got a pretty good wide receiving core. Like they all keep getting hurt. But there's a lot of fun pieces there. Like they're all 22 or younger, but it's a good group. I'd probably pick Wicks out of those though.
All right. We're going to transition over to quarterbacks. Aidan, who are we picking up off the wire at quarterback this week?
So this is another guy. No, I'll go with my favorite, and then we'll go backwards. We'll start with one that I kind of laughed at you for, and it's Nick Mullens.
He threw the worst pick I've ever seen. QB's just got to take. They just got to take a snap. They just got to take a sack, dude. Just take the sack. It's brutal.
Yeah, but pretty impressive for his game from Nick Mullens. He had just over 300 yards and 2 TDs. He did have 2 interceptions, including the one you're talking about, where he pretty much just handed it to the defensive tackle. But in his first start, good for QB 10 on the week. It was kind of what we talked about. That's a really good offense around him. You've got Hawkinson, you've got JJ, you've got Jordan Addison. He was feeding everyone, and he goes up against a Detroit defense that has surrendered the 4th most fantasy points to quarterbacks next week. I anticipate this will be a bit of a high-scoring affair. The Minnesota defense has been pretty strong as of late, but Detroit offense is good. I see this being a game where the Vikings are playing from behind, which sets up pretty well for Nick Mullens' game script in this one. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up over that 300-yard mark, tosses a couple more touchdowns this week against the Lions. Second one I go on over, we keep saying his name, and he keeps delivering, and it's Jake Browning. He's still only 43% owned. In his last 3 games, QB4, QB4, and QB7. The dude's lighting it up. There's really no way around it at this point. Had a bit of a slow start last week. Keegan was victory lapping me and Shaun, as the first half wasn't the prettiest from Jake Browning. But he turned it on again, dude. Won the game, QB7. If you streamed him again, pretty stoked off of that. They are playing the Steelers this week, who they've given up the 8th least amount of fantasy points per QBs, but I wouldn't really dive too deep into that one. Gardner Minshew just hung 21 on them and was QB5 on the week. This is a defense that can be beat. They're trending in the wrong direction. The Steelers as a whole over the last month, I think they've dropped, 3-4 in a row.
Mason Rudolph is starting for them this week.
Mason Rudolph. It's bad vibes, as we like to say here on the program. It's just bad vibes from the Steelers. So really like Jake Browning again. I think he's absolutely worth a play. Once again, especially if you're in a super flex, even a 1 QB league, I'm probably opting to play him. And the last one is the ageless wonder Joe Flacco. Kind of like Jake Browning. The guy just keeps delivering. Just came out of nowhere in his 3 starts: QB 13, QB 10, and QB 8.
That's
Not quite the
insane.
numbers as Browning, but on top of that, he's thrown for 44 or more passes in all 3 of those games. It is pretty much the Joe Flacco let it rip show. With it's pretty sweet, dude. They're playing the Texans this week, who give up the 7th most amount of points to the QB position. So another pretty favorable matchup, in my opinion, for Joe Flacco. He's probably going to light it up again. Like, they're just going to keep letting him throw. And, he's playing well. He had a couple picks. The Bears defense is good. Texans secondary is pretty solid too. But I think this is a much better defensive matchup as a whole in terms of the unit he's facing. So, yeah, man, Joe Flacco, what is he, 38 years old, still hopefully carrying you to a fantasy championship. So 3 very different options here. 3 different guys that, in week 1, we're 0% rostered, all 3 of these guys. And here we are, all acting as QB1s when you need them most. So just as we drew it up, man. Who's your favorite guy this week?
I'm looking at the totals this week for week 16. Vikings, Lions at 47, Browns, Texans at 42.5. And we've got Steelers, Bengals at 38. Lions, Vikings is going to be played indoors in Minnesota. That feels a little shootouty, which I love.
Yep.
And then Browns, Texans is going to get played indoors too. If CJ Stroud and Nico Collins play, I think the Texans are going to be able to push the Browns a bit. And I really think Joe Flacco is super interesting. On paper with projections, I think you could easily get Nick Mullens up to like a 20-point projection, which is
for sure,
kind of nuts.
For sure, which is crazy. But
yeah,
here we are, man.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm in on Nick Mullens. I'd say that if I were streaming a quarterback this week, I think I ride with Nick Mullens. If he cuts backs on the INTs, I think he'll especially hit home. And a nugget too for this game against the Lions. The Lions have not been very good at covering tight ends this season. So we're looking at a massive hawk spot. So
hawk spot. All right.
If we're looking at a hawk spot, that means Nick Mullens is going to have to get there. And I just think that's going to happen. And then there's the uncertainty of Jamar Chase's shoulder. So how are we going to approach that with Jake Browning? So, you got things to weigh here. Moving on to tight ends. So I'm looking specifically at 3 main guys this week, and I'm going back to the well. All 3 of these guys have been people that I've recommended over, I don't know, the last 12 weeks or so. I'm going to start here first with one that isn't matchup dependent and is just, this guy's a baller and he's on the field a ton. And what he's doing as a rookie is super impressive. And that's Tucker Kraft. So since Luke Musgrave went down in week 11, Tucker Kraft has been the tight end 11 in PPR. And I think the run out remains elite for him. He's been top 5 in route percentage over the past month. And Watson's injured, Reed's banged up. Dontayvion Wicks had a nice week, but he's been dealing with a hamstring. Just a lot of factors in place are here for Tucker Kraft to be on the field and see a ton of targets and looks. So that's something that's very exciting for Kraft and fantasy managers that have trusted Kraft. He's got 2 pretty decent matchups over the next couple weeks against Carolina and Minnesota. They're not amazing. They're more middle of the pack, but with his route participation, with how active they're getting him going in the screen game, with design looks, with how banged up the receiving core is, I'm going to continue to start Tucker Kraft with confidence. Rookie tight ends usually don't produce, but when they do, it's towards the tail end of the season, and this is kind of setting up really well for Tucker Kraft. The next guy that I have here, he's the tight end 13 over the past month, but he has a 21% target share over the past 2 weeks, which only trails David Njoku and Trey McBride, and that is Gerald Everett. So Gerald Everett really is the only reliable target right now in this offense with Keenan Allen banged up. I'm expecting Keenan Allen to play, but who knows? Their season's over. They have a new head coach, Easton Stick's playing quarterback. A lot of random variables here with this Chargers offense. But I know Gerald Everett's going to be on the field, and it seems like Easton Stick's going to be targeting him at a heavy clip. Week 16 goes up against Buffalo, who's defended tight ends pretty well. But in week 17, Aidan, he goes up against the Broncos, who have given up 19 points per game to the position, which is league leading. We love that. We love that for Gerald Everett. And then my last tight end recommendation, he's the tight end 12 over the past month. He's the tight end 4 over the past 2 weeks. Hunter Henry has been a different guy since they put Bailey Zappi in at quarterback, and he faces off against a Denver secondary that has given up the most points to tight ends this year in week 16. We are going to hammer matchups against the Broncos. They limit wide receiver production, and they get smacked by tight ends. So out of those 3 options, Gerald Everett, Tucker Kraft, and Hunter Henry, which one's your favorite option in week 16?
Yeah, I think I've got to go with Hunter Henry. I just think like the data doesn't lie on this one. He's coming off a 9-target, 7-catch touchdown game. He had 2 touchdowns the week prior. Like you mentioned, it's kind of like the only person doing any type of offensive value on that offense. And Sam Laporta just hung a hat trick on them. So yeah, I really like everything that's kind of matching up there. Gerald Everett would probably be my number 2. But Easton Stick looked absolutely terrible. There's no telling if he's even going to play. Who knows? Maybe we get Max. What is it? Duggar. I always forget how to say his name. That was pretty bad. And then Tucker Kraft. A lot of people said Tucker Kraft were better than Luke Musgrave when they were both drafted, and he's looked pretty good lately. I think he's a really good blocker too, which keeps him on the field. Pretty consistently, 90% snap share week over week, and is really good in the receiving game. So yeah, I'm probably going Henry, Everett, Kraft in that order, but they all offer really unique upside in my opinion.
All right, moving on here to defenses. If you had to pick a defense to stream this week, Aidan, who are you streaming?
It's easy. I'm calling my own number, and it's got to be the Bears. This unit's out of control lately, just absolutely out of control. Depending on the format you play, they've been a top 10 unit 4 weeks in a row. In the format I'm playing here, they've gone 15 or more 3 weeks in a row, consistently forcing multiple turnovers, multiple sacks. Which, if you told us back in week 1 this was going to be the case down the stretch, I'd call you crazy. But they're playing the Arizona Cardinals. This team doesn't have much to play for at this point. Really not playing well in general. So, no, I really like this Bears unit. On top of that, too, they've got the Falcons in week 17. So, not only do I like them in week 16, like them in week 17, I think this is someone that if you're in the semifinals, you slot in for the last 2 weeks and feel pretty confident about going forward.
How many sacks did Montez Sweat have?
He had 2.5. The team as a unit had 4 with 3 interceptions and their first defensive touchdown of the year. Sorry, second defensive touchdown of the year.
Groundbreaking when you actually trade for good players, what it could do, right? But you're not supposed to trade for good players.
Crazy stuff.
You're not supposed to do it.
Yeah, the unit looks really good, man.
For hypothetical good players.
Yeah, they should eat again this week against the Cardinals.
For me, I'm playing the matchups here. It's a toss-up between the Bengals defense against Mason Rudolph. Mason Rudolph is a turnover machine. Mason Rudolph also
turnover machine.
I feel like he's going to get sacked 5 or 6 times. However, my only fear with the Bengals defense, it's so banged up and it's not that good. So I feel like if I had to pick an option here, get right spot for the Green Bay Packers against the Carolina Panthers. I just can't imagine the Panthers getting much done this week against the Packers. So I'm streaming those two, and then Commanders are kind of live. If Trevor Siemian's the quarterback for the Jets, but probably Packers against the Panthers. I'd feel confident they score like 8 fantasy points. So
I'll actually be live on location there. So maybe I can help out.
You're going to be at the Panthers game?
I am going to be at the Panthers game. Yeah, my brother's out in Charlotte. We're doing the holidays out there, so I will unfortunately be live on location watching Jordan Love against the Panthers. Yeah, it should be really enjoyable.
Very cool. That is very cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's going to do it here for our Waiver Wire episode. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. If you have not had the chance yet, you know what to do. Subscribe to the channel. You do not want to miss the content that we are dropping weekly here for you. Aidan, thank you for hopping on and joining me as always. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Till next time.